The smell of burnt coffee didn't bother Emily anymore. She stared out her studio apartment's single window, watching as the early morning mist curled around the edges of the glass. Her uniform clung to her from the night shift at the car wash, damp with steam and the sweet, chemical tang of wax. She stood barefoot on the cracked linoleum, nursing a chipped mug and listening to the hiss of the kettle she'd forgotten to turn off. Then came the knock. Not the kind of knock you expect. Not a delivery, not a neighbor, not even the mailman. It was the kind of knock that came with ghosts, wrapped in perfume and money. She opened the door, and there they were. Diane, her mother, wearing a pastel cardigan and pearls, like it was still 1983. And Greg, tall, trim, teeth too white, eyes that scanned the room like a cop at a drug bust. He held a gift bag in one hand and a bouquet of grocery store roses in the other. The paper rustled in the breeze, but neither of them said a word at first. Emily didn't speak either. She just tilted her head, mug still in hand, the faint outline of a bruise under her eye, where she'd hit her head on a low shelf the day before. She looked like someone who lived alone and worked too much, which she was. Finally, Diane forced a smile, the kind you offer before a funeral or after a betrayal. "We heard you're working with Robert," she said, voice light, sugary, fake. "He's probably filling your head with a lot of stories about the past." Emily blinked. No hug, no apology, just that. Greg stepped forward, eyeing her apartment like he was appraising it for demolition. "Nice place," he said, lying. Emily moved her body slightly so that she blocked the shelf with the photo. Her and Robert at the racetrack, arms around each other, grease on their hands, laughing like they had escaped something. She didn't know why she protected it. Maybe because it was one of the only pictures where she looked like herself. "What do you want?" she asked. "Oh, honey," Diane cooed. "Don't be like that. We just wanted to see you." Greg's eyes flicked to her laptop, then to the pile of unopened mail, then to the toolbox on the floor. They weren't here for her. "You're not here because you missed me," Emily said, voice quiet but steady. "You're here because you're scared I'm going to find something." Diane flinched. Greg stiffened, and in that moment, the performance cracked. Diane clutched her purse a little tighter. "That's not true. We just wanted to help." Emily took a slow breath, stepped back into the doorway, and shut the door. Calmly, firmly, the bouquet caught in the frame. She didn't bother removing it. The flowers could rot there. That evening, Emily stood under the flickering kitchen light, the same mug in her hand. Cold coffee now. She dialed Robert. He picked up on the second ring. "You all right?" "They know I'm working with you," she said. No preamble. There was silence on the line. Then a low breath, like he'd been waiting for this call. "And it scares them," she added. A long pause. Then Robert's voice, quiet but edged with something she hadn't heard before. Not anger, not fear. Resolve. Then it's time they remembered why. It started after the funeral. That's what she realized. Her dad had barely been in the ground when Diane brought Greg home. Not even a full 3 weeks after the burial, still wearing widow's black, still using the grief like a currency. Greg had money. Greg had connections. Greg had a way of making Diane feel like she hadn't wasted her life on a mechanic from the suburbs. Emily was 17. She remembered sitting at the dinner table while Diane served steak, something her dad could never afford. And Greg spoke about golf like it was a religion. Emily had said something sarcastic. Greg had laughed too hard. Diane had scolded her. The next week, Emily's room had been repainted and her father's tools moved to the garage. 3 months later, Greg sat her down and said she made things too tense for Diane, that it was too painful to have her around. Too many memories of her dad. He handed her a check for $500 and told her she'd figure it out. She did. She slept in her car, got a job at a gas station, then another at the car wash. She kept her head down. She counted tips. She taught herself how to fix the broken heater in her car. She started keeping a journal of everything she remembered from before. And then Robert called. At first, she didn't trust him. He was her dad's brother, the one who used to fight with Diane over money, the one who disappeared from family Christmases and didn't come to the funeral. But he knew things. He asked questions no one else had. He didn't offer a handout, just a chance to start over. Emily had been working in his shop part-time for 3 months now. He taught her things her dad never had time for. Engines, diagnostics, electrical systems. It felt like learning a secret language. She was good at it. Now her mother and Greg had shown up like snakes in a garden, and snakes don't show unless they smell something worth biting. The next day at the shop, Emily asked Robert about the past. He was underneath a lifted car, oil dripping from the axle. "You sure you want to know?" he asked. "I think I need to," she said. He slid out, wiped his hands on a rag, looked at her long and hard. "Your father had something they wanted, something they thought died with him. What was it?" Robert hesitated, then said, "Proof." Robert didn't speak for a long time after that. He just sat there at Emily's tiny kitchen table, the tablet still glowing with messages too heavy for this cramped space. Matt shifted nervously on the couch, twisting his sleeves, waiting for someone to break the silence. Emily could feel the air change, thicken. Finally, Robert inhaled through his nose and said, "This explains a lot." He turned to Matt, calm but deadly serious. "You did good, kid. I mean that. But you didn't show this to anyone else, right? Not even Grace?" Matt shook his head. "Number, I didn't know what to do. I didn't even mean to see it." Emily set a glass of water in front of him. "You did the right thing." Robert leaned back. "Greg's been poking around the business for months. I thought he was just sniffing for ways to seem useful. But I should have guessed he was setting something up." Emily raised an eyebrow. "Why didn't you say anything before?" "Because I didn't want to believe Kelly was part of it," he admitted, voice low. "I knew she wasn't perfect, but this? She's stealing from her own kids." Emily crossed her arms. "You don't steal millions from someone you care about. Not this methodically, not this clean." Robert nodded slowly. "They're smart. They moved it through shell companies I barely track anymore. Quiet exits, ghost vendors. On paper, it looks like the business is doing just fine." His jaw tightened. "But it's bleeding." Matt looked up. "What do we do?" Robert stood. There was a steel in him now that hadn't been there before. "We gather more. Everything. We don't go to the cops yet. Not until I can guarantee they won't slip away with my company or your futures." He turned to Emily. "We're going to make sure they don't see it coming." The next few days moved like molasses mixed with dynamite. Robert called in a favor from a guy named Nico, a grizzled forensic accountant who looked more like a biker than a financial detective. Within 24 hours, Nico had access to Robert's records and was already tracing transfers. Meanwhile, Emily found herself slipping into a role she never expected to play. Mole. She reviewed purchase orders, flagged anything tied to the consulting branches Greg had advised. She even flirted her way into a quick conversation with one of the old foundation contacts, a local nonprofit director who quietly confessed they hadn't received a donation check in over a year. And Matt? Matt became a shadow in his own house. He started forward his mom's texts and emails to a dummy account, quietly uploading screenshots from Kelly's tablet whenever she left it unattended. The family was an illusion now. A play where everyone was pretending not to notice the fire burning down the walls. Emily watched Diane closely, too. Something about her mother's presence the other day still lingered like the echo of a slap. She hadn't come out of love. That smile had been the smile of someone who knew the ground was shifting beneath her stilettos and was hoping to charm her way out of the quake. Diane knew, or suspected. She always had a way of appearing right before something collapsed. Then, on a rainy Thursday, everything nearly went sideways. Emily came by the main shop to drop off invoices. As she stepped into the back office, she heard Greg's voice, muffled but close. She froze. "I don't like how quiet Robert's gotten," Greg was saying. "He's not asking about the numbers anymore." Kelly's reply came sharp. "That's because he doesn't want to deal with it. He never liked the money side." Greg laughed bitterly. "He doesn't like a lot of things, including you running his company behind his back." There was a pause. Then Kelly added, "Well, he won't have to deal with any of it much longer." Emily took a shaky breath and slowly backed out. She hadn't been seen. Later that night, she told Robert. He didn't react, just nodded once. "That confirms it," he said. "They're not just stealing. They're planning a clean break, a full exit." "To where?" He shrugged. "Offshore, probably. Someplace where a subpoena can't touch them. I just didn't think Kelly had it in her." "She doesn't," Emily said. "But Greg does, and she's willing to follow." 2 nights later, Robert called her again. This time, his voice had a sharpness to it, a purpose. "I need you to come to the warehouse." The warehouse was a forgotten piece of the company empire, a distribution hub that hadn't been used in years. Robert had turned it into something else now. There were laptops, surveillance monitors, printouts spread across the table. Nico sat in the corner, cross-referencing spreadsheets with the intensity of a man solving a murder. "What am I looking at?" Emily asked. Robert didn't answer. He just hit play on one of the monitors. It was a grainy video feed from a hidden camera in Kelly's consulting office. In the footage, Greg stood beside her desk, arms folded, his voice low and controlled. "It's wired. All of it," he said. "Last transfers in 2 days. The passport guy is expecting us Sunday night." Kelly looked up. "And the kids? They'll be fine. They've got Robert. And Diane can handle Emily if she gets curious again." Emily's stomach dropped. Robert didn't flinch. "They're gone? They just don't know it yet." Emily sat on the garage floor, legs pulled up, her back pressed against an old metal tool chest that had once belonged to her father. The cement beneath her jeans was cold and rough, and the only light in the room flickered like it might give up at any second. It was quiet now, the kind of quiet that wraps around you when the world is about to change. In her hands, a dusty cardboard box sealed with cracked painter's tape. The words, "Do not open R," scrawled across the top in the shaky, stubborn handwriting she hadn't seen in years. Robert stood in the doorway. "I never knew he kept this," he said quietly. "I thought he destroyed everything." Inside the box were fragments of a life her father hadn't been allowed to finish. Old Polaroids, some faded, some curling at the edges, showed men in hard hats, transit tunnels, blueprints pinned to walls. Then there were the notebook pages, diagrams with thick red X's, contracts with whole paragraphs blacked out, a photo of a man she didn't recognize, smiling next to her dad. And finally, at the bottom, a battered cassette recorder with a cracked plastic casing. Emily hesitated. Then she pressed play. A moment of static, then her father's voice, older, worn, but calm. "If you're hearing this, it means I can't protect you anymore. They're hiding something. I was close. But this isn't just about money. It's about what happened to Johnny." Emily's hand went slack. The cassette clicked as it ended, but she didn't move. "Who's Johnny?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. Robert didn't speak for a long time. Then he sat beside her on the floor, staring at nothing. "My brother," he said, "older than me. Your uncle, I didn't even know he existed." "You weren't supposed to," Robert said. "He disappeared when I was 17, officially. Hiking accident, no body, no funeral, just gone." He ran a hand over his face, old grief flaring behind his eyes. "Your dad never believed it. Said Johnny had uncovered something, a flaw in the city's safety infrastructure, something buried under the budgets and blueprints. He said Northbridge was covering it up." "Northbridge?" Emily blinked. "Greg's company?" Robert looked at her. She nodded slowly. "I saw it, on a business card, in Greg's jacket." Robert cursed under his breath. Emily stood, the box still clutched in her arms. "This goes deeper than theft. It always did." The next few days, Emily stopped sleeping. She stayed at the garage, combing through files, decoding faded annotations her father had scrawled in the margins of documents older than her high school diploma. Somewhere in all of it was a pattern, evidence of a failed diagnostic system meant to protect lives on the city's rail lines, malfunctions, near misses. One actual crash that had been blamed on operator error, but her father's notes painted a different picture. Negligence hidden behind technical jargon, all tied to Northbridge engineering. And Johnny's name was on the early code. He had been a software analyst, a whistleblower in the making, and then he vanished. Emily pieced it together like someone solving their own inheritance, not money, but grief, legacy, truth. What chilled her most were the letters her father never mailed, draft after draft to city officials, attorneys, even reporters, always edited, never sent. She realized he wasn't just trying to protect his family from danger. He was protecting them from the knowledge of it. Because once you know, you can't unknow. And then you're in it. And now she was in it. That night, returning to her apartment, Emily noticed the hallway light was out. The building was quiet, too quiet. The door to her unit was slightly ajar. Her chest tightened. Inside, nothing was broken. Nothing obvious was missing. The lamp was still where she left it. So was the blanket on the couch, but the air had shifted. Still, cold. She moved to the desk. Her laptop was gone. Her stomach turned. She dropped to the floor. The flash drive, the one Matt had copied the files onto, had been taped beneath the drawer for safekeeping. Gone, not stolen, extracted. Someone had known where to look. Emily backed out of the apartment, hand on her phone, not dialing 911, but the only person who wouldn't ask questions she couldn't yet answer. Robert picked up on the second ring. "They were here," she said. He didn't hesitate. You okay? Yes. What's missing? My laptop. The drive. That's it. That's not a robbery, Robert said. That's a warning. Emily stood in the stairwell, trying not to shake. They're getting nervous. That means we're getting close. By morning, the garage didn't feel like a workplace anymore. It felt like headquarters. Robert brought in Nico and another man. Someone from before, he said. Someone who didn't blink when Emily told him what had happened. Matt came by after school, paler than usual, but with a folder in his backpack. Photocopies of a schedule Greg had printed. A trip booked for the next week. A transfer set to go through the morning after they departed. They're pulling the last wire from an IP in Aruba, Matt said. Offshore. Robert took the folder, looked up. Then we have to hit them before they board the plane. Emily nodded. We'll need evidence. Unshakable. And we need it fast. Robert turned to her. You're going to be the one to get it. She blinked. Me? You're the last person they suspect of being this close. You've always been the problem child. The outsider. That's your shield. You'll use it. Emily exhaled, slow and steady. She looked down at the tape-covered box in her hands, her father's handwriting, her uncle's name, and something clicked. I'll do it, she said. But when we take them down, we don't just stop at Greg and Kelly. Robert met her gaze. We don't, because now, this wasn't about family. It was about legacy, and Emily was done being erased. Emily stood in the garage, clutching the flash drive in her hand like it was a live wire. The evidence inside was damning. Transfers, confidential reports, email chains, and Greg's name buried in digital ink on contracts that connected everything. The embezzlement, the Northbridge cover-up, and the disappearance of Johnny, her lost uncle. Her heart raced, but for the first time in years, it wasn't fear. It was clarity. The air inside the garage buzzed with quiet energy. Nico tapped rapidly on the laptop, copying the last batch of files. Robert stood behind him, arms crossed, jaw tight. None of them had slept. None of them would, until it was done. Emily wasn't afraid anymore. This wasn't about revenge. Not really. Not even about justice in the legal sense. It was about the truth, her truth. And tonight, it would no longer be buried. They waited until the office building was nearly empty, late enough that no one would be around, but early enough that the security guards were still in routine mode. Robert's old key card still worked. Apparently Greg had never thought to disable it. Emily slipped through the back door with Nico and Robert close behind. She knew where Greg kept the real files, not on his work computer, but on a separate machine, offline, locked in a drawer that he assumed no one ever thought to check. He never expected Emily would come back through that door. She picked the lock-ins under a minute. Her father had taught her how, back when it was just them, tinkering with broken locks and teaching her how every mechanism has a rhythm, even the ones that try to keep you out. Inside were hard drives, backup files, and 3 manila folders. Emily grabbed everything. That's when Greg walked in. He froze. For a moment, no one moved. Just the dull thud of Emily's heartbeat in her ears. What the hell are you doing in my office? He demanded. You know exactly what I'm doing, Emily said, standing slowly. You stole from the company, from Robert, from your own stepchildren. You tried to bury the truth about Johnny, and now you're going to pay for it. Greg scoffed, recovering quickly. You think anyone's going to believe a gas station clerk with a grudge and a flash drive full of out-of-context documents? Actually, Robert said, stepping into view, they're going to believe the company's majority owner and his forensic team. We've been tracking you for weeks. Greg's smirk cracked. And this, Emily held up the flash drive, is just the beginning. By morning, Greg was in custody. The files had been handed to the DA's office. With Robert's connections and Nico's documentation, the case came together quickly. Embezzlement, wire fraud, evidence tampering, even obstruction of justice related to Johnny's disappearance, now reopened under a new investigation. Kelly fled town the next day. Diane tried to call, but Emily didn't answer. There was nothing left to say, and for the first time in years, there was no guilt in that. Emily stood outside the garage a week later, watching as the sun began to rise over the cracked pavement and the rusting old sign. This place used to feel like a cage. The weight of her father's absence, the reminder of a family that had chosen convenience over connection. But now, it felt like something else, a monument, to survival, to truth, to the woman she had become. Robert walked out behind her, wiping his hands on a rag. You're really leaving? I think it's time. He nodded. You know you saved this place, right? You didn't just catch them. You kept your father's legacy alive. She smiled, sad and certain. I didn't do it for him. Not entirely. Robert looked at her for a moment, then nodded. Where will you go? I don't know. Somewhere new. Somewhere quiet. You ever think about starting your own shop? Emily laughed softly. One day. For now, I just want a life that's mine. She walked away from the garage, once a burden, now a symbol of her strength, without looking back, not because she didn't care, but because she finally could. Emily had reclaimed more than the truth. She had reclaimed herself.